Hi everyone, I'm Mork and I make minis in HeroForge. This week's mini is gonna be one of my first god tier minis that I presented on this channel, and it is a Yuan-Ti shadow monk who is also a constrictor snake instead of a regular venomous Yuan-Ti. So this is red. The special thing about Rat is one thing he's killing here a goblin, you know? His blood is like seeping while like the lower part of his body doesn't get much blood at all. This was like kind of a fun mini in the sense that because he is a shadow monk, I am playing a lot here with like the darkness. I made this mini because I was trying to make like a new character for a D&D campaign. Originally, this guy was supposed to be a shifter. So a shifter is like a sort of a person who shapeshifts into an animal, but I kind of imagined more. But it's usually like these shifter animals are more like wolf-like or werewolf-like or wereboar. Were likes rather than like anything snaky. So I wanted to make like a sort of a snake character, and then when I presented the concept to the dungeon master was like, "Hey, did you know that Yuan-Tis exist?" So mechanically he's a shifter, but spiritually, but roleplay wise he's a Yuan-Ti, and more specifically he is a sort of a Yuan-Ti that because Yuan-Tis are like sort of people who undergo like a transformation into a snake person. I kind of imagined like a Yuan-Ti that maybe got like the shorter end of the deal, but when this guy transformed, he didn't transform into a cobra, he didn't transform into an anaconda, he didn't transform into a rattler snake, he transformed into a rat snake, who is also like a type of a constrictor. So a lot of his physiology is based on the black rat snake species. So let's get to the history of this mini. I think we can call this kind of a beginning of our rat snake. I knew I kind of like wanted to do like these sort of darker colors, and here I was also thinking whether I want to use like a snake head that is provided by HeroForge. If we go here, you can see that HeroForge has also like a snake head option, but the reason why I didn't go with this option is because the head is not editable. Like you can just barely edit it, and the other thing is I wanted to like create a sort of a predatorial look in the eyes of this person, because he's evil. Because he's evil. And when I did, I couldn't really quite get that, with this sort of a snake head. Another issue of this head is if we go to the face here and we make him go like "arr," you can see the issue of the teeth, because these teeth specifically, like when a snake has like fangs like this, it means there is a venom stored inside of them. When you take a look at rat snake species, they don't really have like they don't have venom because they constrict their prey. So because they don't have venom, they also don't have like these teeth developed. Instead, they have like this sort of like small razor teeth which are able to hold the prey in place. This was like a sort of a start, So for the base head of this character, I'm actually using the elongated alien features. I really like using these features, especially for any sort of like animalistic sort of characters. I think they can look pretty great, especially if you like combine them with like other features. Like here I'm using goblin features for the head. Here I'm using cunning, watchful features. I only edited like the shape and detail part of it. I still haven't done here any big edits or the small edits. When I was making the mini, I also knew that I would 100% want to put in like the snake tongue. Now I wasn't sure exactly how I wanted to do the posing of the character. I knew that I wanted him to like wrap around his victim like Constrictor style, but I haven't like figured out how exactly I'm going to do it. This was more of like an exploration phase still at this point. I'm using here the ribbit cape, and I think this ribbit cape just kind of stuck with me. I really liked it, and I also like this other cape. I'm not sure if this is kit bashed yet. No, it's not. But for this outfit, I'm specifically using a turtleneck here. And I'm also using a capelet. Yeah. But this capelet later on gets kit bashed because, as you can see here, we have some issues here with the way the cape connects to the capelet. So I want to get like rid of it and make it look better. This is also where I started to think a little bit about the area that he's going to be in. And I was thinking like something a little bit more arid, something that has like dead trees and so on, but we'll get to it later. The way I imagine this Shadow Monk to be played is with dual wielding daggers, so I wanted to give him those dual wielding daggers. This was just me like trying out what the options are, and this is not something I went for ultimately. Here he is looking quite vicious, but it's not sort of a look that I went for ultimately. Ooh, yeah, this one is good. This one is good. And you can already see kind of like the vision, you know, of the guy just like looking at you like with a side eye, which I don't think I would be able to like make this sort of a cool look if I was using like a face that is not editable, you know. Another thing I thought of that could be quite fun was adding a mask to this character. So I kind of imagine that in one hand he is going to have the knife, and the other one is going to be sheathed, and he's also going to have a sort of a mask, you know. So like when I'm like looking through HeroForge items, I sometimes like putting them up on display just to get like an idea of what I'm able to work with. And a lot of these masks have issue that they are filled in completely. You know, you can see here, this is filled in, 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 this is filled in. This cyberpunk mask is also filled in, so I couldn't use it because it looked bad. This is filled in, this is filled in. Like, almost all of them are filled in, except for this one. Except for this one, which is why I ultimately use this for this mini. And I don't really understand why they didn't do the same thing with this mask right here for all the other ones, because you also have like a kitsune mask in HeroForge, and that one you are able to put like into a hand. But like all of these other masks, they don't have that sort of a thing where they are hollowed out. And I feel like just holding your mask in any universe so that you like show off the face of the character is really a common pose. So it really sucks that like we have all these cool mask options, but like you can't really like hold them in your hand. This is what I ended up with, you know, mask-wise. Of course, I didn't like adjust the fingers yet, you know. And yeah, and I also added a tree. I almost never add this sort of a tree in HeroForge, but I felt like it was kind of like an appropriate choice to the environment that I had in mind. And oh boy, we are starting to have a goblin here who is gonna be who's gonna become a goblin burrito real soon. I started preparing the body of the goblin. I made him lie down. Here I gave the goblin like proper proper clothes for a goblin. I wanted to make this goblin like at least some challenge, you know, a little bit of a challenge. So he's got like war paints on and he is like a warrior. I really like this sort of a look on my Constrictor here with the white and the black here. I really liked that. Now, here's a pretty fun part of the mini. So this is where I kind of like started wrapping the goblin in the snake, you know? And as I was kind of like wrapping him and I was finishing wrapping him up and I was like quite satisfied, I kind of felt like, well, doesn't this look a little bit weird? I feel like this kind of looks wrong, you know? Because I started kind of like thinking about snakes. If I was a snake, would nature make me wrap my body around another person with my back? You know, like essentially this Yuan-Ti is wrapping up like this, you know? And I felt like you probably couldn't get like all that much power if you were wrapping around like this around your victim. So then I switched it around. So I started doing the other thing, and then I started wrapping around the goblin with like the belly side, so like this. So essentially kind of like hugging him with the body, you know, like the belly. So but then this thing like it's, poor goblin can't even see. But yeah, I started thinking about this, and I was like, wait, this also just kind of doesn't look right. And I also didn't really like that it made the mini kind of like short. I just wanted the guy to be a little bit taller, so that he like goes nicely with the tree. Like this, not like this. Maybe the goblin is like standing more upright or something like that. That could help me get this sort of an effect. But the other thing is also, this is the point where I started looking up online research as to like how the snake actually wraps their body around a goblin. And I couldn't find anything. It wasn't until I used like Gemini for this sort of a purpose, and Gemini actually managed to find like a research paper for me which talks about exactly this sort of a thing, which is like how the constrictor snakes actually wrap their body around their victims. And the fun thing about the research paper is that they found out all of the constrictor snakes, they don't do it with their belly, you know, they don't wrap around with their belly, or they don't wrap around with their spine. All of them actually just wrap with their sides, you know, so like this sort of a thing. And another interesting thing is that there was some difference also between the species. If I remember correctly, like species like pythons, when they were wrapping around their victims, they wrapped around like sideways, but they had their belly up. So, so if, let's say I was a python, which I'm not, if let's say I was a python and I look down, I would see my belly, you know? And I believe they also mentioned that Rat Snake had like a different burrito wrapping thing going on. When they wrapped sideways around their victim, and if I was a rat snake and I would look down, I wouldn't see my belly because my belly was like down, so I would be like wrapping up kind of like this, like this. And this is where I started putting my newfound knowledge to practice. So you can see that from Rat Snake's point of view, when he looks down, he doesn't see his belly. And that's again because the belly is down, yeah. And I also made the goblin so that like there's a bit more of a balance to the entire mini, and it doesn't look like Rat Snake is just going to collapse from this position. I made the goblin kneel, as he's kind of like struggling to give it a bit more balance. And I also made this guy lean against the tree, Maybe it's like hiding a little bit, something like that. I kind of imagine that Rat here is making a sort of a perception check as he's like strangling this poor goblin. At this point I was kind of messing a bit more with the outfit, and you can see that I got rid of the capelet. It was poking through the cape. Then I was like playing with the goblin a little bit, and I made him essentially like bleed, because I imagine that from all the pressure that is like put on his body, he's just going to bleed from that. You can see I finally managed to create a good Yuan-Ti goblin burrito. Here I was thinking about what sort of a weapon I want to use for Rat here. And I had like a few options, and ultimately I went with this sort of a sword. It is actually a sword, but then I kind of like kit bashed it to make it like smaller and make it look more like a dagger, something like that. Well, that's a little bit too low. You can see me putting the dagger to the guy's hand, and the goblin is not having a great time with it. He just kind of like barely sees it, as he's like losing pretty much his consciousness, and he's kind of struggling to even hold onto the snake guy properly. He doesn't have any strength anymore. At this point I started to play a bit more with the color scheme because I wasn't sure entirely how I wanted to do it. This is like a sort of a red and black color scheme for my character, but I wasn't quite into it. Here we have more of a different color scheme to the skin of the snake to be more representative of the black rat snake. And you can kind of see here the issue is that the color, the skin color, and the color of the clothes are pretty uniform, so they're kind of like, they're not working well together because they're kind of fighting for the same spot. Then I started using a bit lighter colors to break it up a little bit better, and this still wasn't quite it. Then I kind of like went into a cream color scheme, which kind of like matches almost this color, but this one is like slightly more greenish, whereas this one is more yellowish. And I like this one. I really like this one. And this is the ultimate color scheme that I decided to go for, and I really like this one because it's so much more contrastive to his like own skin. Then again, next thing that I was looking up is what sort of a dagger sheath I wanted to use, and I ultimately went with this one. as you can see. And of course, I also put it on the other side because this dagger is unsheathed. This is the part where I re-added the capelet, you know, because of the previous issue of clipping. Now I kit bashed it in. I also started working on the face decals. So I was trying to mimic what the black red snake looks like. That's why I also am using like these sort of eyes instead of like the slitted eyes that we often see on snakes. It's because like the red snake species, they have like these round large eyes. They're actually like kind of cute. And this is also the point of the mini. Like when we compare it to the previous iterations of Rat here, I felt like Rat was starting to look kind of cute, honestly. He's looking cute as he's like killing this poor goblin. Now here I started to work a bit more on the environment. I keep talking about these mushrooms on my channel with how much I love them and love using them in the environment, and I felt like adding them to this dead tree made it so much more alive. I really love it, you know, like these things are really great. I also added a small like tree branch. Of course, I also love using rocks because rocks look quite natural and they help like break up the environment a bit more. And I figured that maybe this is a sort of a scene where this goblin was munching on some food, you know, and he got like caught off guard, and now he's paying consequences for that. Now here is the part where I wanted to add in more light work, more lights, and make this seem more like there's a night out there. And I really love the way the dark light, if we go here and we disable this light. Whoop, wrong light. Yep, no, right light. Yeah, this is what it looks like. This is what it looks like without the light, and this is what it looks like with the dark magic light. And I just really love how the darkness like goes on the cave, which is also like the reason why I didn't have to like add any additional embellishments on the cave, because the shadows did most of the work. And I also wanted to add like another element, and I added like a light here to better sell the impression that this is like night. I want to add a sort of a campfire light, you know. I mean, it kind of makes sense, you know, if he was like munching on some food that was probably cooked, but I don't know. Would goblins cook food or would they eat raw meat? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But he would probably still welcome like some warmth from the fire. And this was ultimately my final version of Constrictor and Rat here. But I kind of made this guy like really long time ago, and I felt like, well, I felt like I could do a bit of a better job of trying to sell this sort of a darkness. Because when you take a look at this angle, I mean, if you do look at the cape, if you look at the cape and the hood, I think it sells a sort of an effect that it's like a nighttime. But when we just take a look here, we have like this sort of a weird section which tells us that it's just like a normal daylight, you know? And we have also like this sort of a section which tells us, yeah, there is probably some campfire, but it's not, I don't think it's completely obvious, but there is a campfire. So I revisited this mini and I added a bit more. I added some additional stuff to make the effect more visible. I added a whole lot more darkness to the mini, and not just like through these lights that are here. So you can see without lights it looks like this, with lights it looks like this, without lights it looks like this, with lights it looks like this. I think this managed to sell the illusion of a campfire much better. And if we take a look at our decals here, there are also projected decals, which I'm projecting on the entire mini. You can see I'm projecting here, I am projecting here, and I am projecting here. And what I am projecting here is actually the gradient. So if I turn these off, like let's say I turn off this one, this is what it looks like. If I turn off this one, it looks like this. And if I turn off this one, it looks like this. So it really just kind of helps with making the area darker. I'm using here specifically circle gradient. Here I am also using a circle, another circle gradient to create more shadows. This is not something I ultimately went with. I edited the colors a bit more. And the final version of the character just looks like this. We have the projected decals, one here, one here, and you can like also choose like what it is supposed to be projected on, you know? One here. You can see that I'm, for example, not projecting on the blades or on the eyes. Same sort of a situation here. But I felt like this sort of a angle, especially like this one and this one, helped sell the night effect much better. I'm not entirely sure about this one. If we take a look at the bottom half here, I think it kind of sells the effect of the night. But I'm not so sure about this one. Like this to me feels like a daylight, and I wanted like a more orange light to be projected on this part of the mini. The issue is if I try to do that, you know, I have to put like the light more like here. And the issue is that the lights get kind of reflected in the eyeballs, and I didn't like that. I didn't really like that. It got kind of reflected in the eyes, and the light was like not big enough anyway. I think it just kind of takes a lot of detail from the eye, so I didn't quite like that. I wish this is something that we could like turn off so that like this light doesn't get projected in the eyes. In another mini I'm using it to like a cooler effect, but in this one I didn't really want to use that. Luckily I'm able to edit like this sort of stuff in the portrait section, and in here I am not sure why this isn't part of the regular HeroForge and why I am not able to add it to the original model, but here I am able to change like the way the sun, like at which angle the sun actually like projects its colors, and I can also like change the intensity, the color, and the sun rotation. I can essentially show how I wish the light to be projected on this mini, and I think this really helps sell the illusion of darkness here. It really makes me wish I was able to add this sort of a light in my regular mini. I think that would just really help a lot, because you can see that in this preview, in this portrait preview, I am like 100% satisfied with how it looks. So instead of like making this sun be like sunny, I'm just using it as another means for me to help sell the idea of a campfire, which is just like maybe right here or something like that. Alright, I think that's about it for the mini. If you liked it, let me know. If you didn't like it, let me know. And yeah, this is one of my first God tier minis, and I hope you enjoyed it. I have many more minis to come, so I'm looking forward to that. Alright, thank you for watching, take care, and bye bye.